I'm going to set his name to give him an applause. You all know who he is and what he's here to do, or else he wouldn't be here this morning. But let's give him our undivided attention. And thank you guys for being here.
Great. All right. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Thank you so much for having me come here this weekend to Calgary. So glad to be here. So honored to be here. And, you know, this church actually had me come to speak at a men's event or something, like, I don't know how many years ago, but it was like a decade ago, it seems. And it was winter camping. And I just want to tell you, whoever was there at that event, it was absolutely the worst event of my entire life. And I tell people about that event when I talk about winter camping in Calgary. I don't even know where we went. I'm not familiar with the area. But all I remember is the first night we were there. I think it must have been February or something like that, right? Like, it was January. And I remember lying in my sleeping bag in this tent. And I remember I couldn't go to sleep. I was so cold. And I remember lying in my sleeping bag, and I was like this. And I went to look at my watch. I was like, and it was 2 a.m. I was like, oh, and I just said, Jesus, please help me go to sleep. And I dozed off, and I was like, I woke up. I was like, oh, I slept. Oh, it's 2:15. Oh. It was the worst of, honestly. It's Gary? I said to Gary, if you ever do, don't ever invite me. I'm not coming. I'm just not that desperate for a good time. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for being here. I recognize there's a lot of things you could be doing on a Saturday. Appreciate the fact you're here for this. Let me kind of give you a quick rundown of how today's going to look. This first class that we're going to do, Homosexuality 101, Understanding the Basics, it's the longest class. It's going to go about an hour and 10 minutes. You know, if you need to get up, stretch, go to the bathroom, whatever, or just leave, none of that will hurt my feelings. I get paid whether you stay or not. It doesn't matter to me. Then we'll have a short break. And then the second class, we're going to talk about how to share our faith, what to say, what not to say with gay and lesbian people, what works, what doesn't. And, you know, everybody, I recognize that the numbers of people in the church who are same-sex attracted is relatively small statistically, you know, 2.5%, 3% maybe. But the numbers of people in our churches who know somebody who is living a gay life is about 100%. If you think, oh, I don't know anybody who's gay, then you're completely clued out. You do, trust me. And so they're at your work. You work with them. They're in your neighborhoods. They're your next door neighbors. You go to school with these people. And so it is important for us to be able to learn what works and what doesn't when it comes to sharing the good news of Jesus with these people. And so we're going to talk about that. Then there's a lunch break. For those of you who want to come back, our third and final class, which is the shortest, we're going to talk a little bit about how to help Christians who are same-sex attracted. And we're going to look at the top arguments that gay rights proponents and gay-affirming churches use to show why they say homosexuality is approved by God. And they are able to show you many different scriptures, and in a short amount of time can have many Christians scratching their heads going, gee, maybe homosexuality is okay. Look at their arguments that the scriptures are using. Maybe after all, I've been thinking wrong all this time, and our church fellowship is wrong on this issue. And so what we'll do is we'll look at the top 10 arguments that they use. There's about 30 of them, but we'll just look at the top 10. They're pretty easy to dismantle their arguments, but you just need to know what you're doing. That's what we'll do in our final class today, and then we'll be dismissed. All right? Sound good?
Yeah.
Great. So our first class here, Homosexuality 101, Understanding the Basics. Leading a church in Halifax, Nova Scotia for a few years, and while I was there, started this ministry called Strength and Weakness. I'll give you a little bit more history later as I go on, but the ministry's got three primary purposes. The first one is to help Christians who come from homosexual background, but who now as followers of Jesus unwanted same-sex attractions. The second purpose of the ministry is to help families in churches around the world who've got a family member who's involved in homosexuality, whether that's a son or a daughter, brother or sister. And then the third thing that the ministry has turned into is that it's turned into an educational tool. And now, you know, for the last several years, my wife and I have traveled around the world and spoken to over 80,000 people in churches, faith-based groups, and universities all around the world on this issue. And so that's what the ministry does. That's what we've been up to. So here's a good place to start. Let's just start at a really obvious place. What does the Bible say about homosexuality? Well, not a lot. We really only get 5 scriptures, and it's not a lot to go on. Some might argue, but nevertheless, those are the 5. Let's just look at one of them right here, 1 Corinthians chapter 6, 9, and 10, one of the 5. Don't you realize that those who do wrong will not inherit the kingdom of God? Don't fool yourselves. Those who indulge in sexual sin, or who worship idols, or commit adultery, or are male prostitutes, or practice homosexuality, or are thieves, or greedy people, or drunkards, or are abusive, or cheat people, none of these people will inherit the kingdom of God. Now, all of us found ourselves somewhere on that list. And a lot of times people are like, oh, no, I'm not a thief. I don't abuse people. I've never been drunk. And I'm like, yeah, but you live in North America, so we know you're guilty there. So we've all found ourselves somewhere on that list. Homosexuality is just one of that. God says, listen, I'm the creator. I'm the architect and designer of life. I made you. I know what works and what doesn't. And for you to live a happy, fulfilled life, participating in homosexuality is not something I want you to do. It will only take away from your life. It will not add to it. Because I love you so much, I'm saying, please don't do this, because you're only going to hurt yourself. So that's just one of the 5 scriptures. And I know a lot of times people say, God, there's only 5, but there's a lot we can learn from these 5. For instance, it's important to recognize in both the Old and the New Testaments. If all we had to go on were these 2 passages here in Leviticus, you know, the gay rights advocates and proponents could have an argument that homosexuality is something that God would approve of. But we actually get it in both the Old and the New Testaments. And so that is a significant thing to note there. It's also important to notice that these scriptures were written thousands of years apart. Why is that important? Well, because people will say, God, this is 2017. I live in Calgary. You can't trust what the Bible says on sexual ethics today. Like, scriptures were written thousands of years ago, right? This is a different culture, different world, different life. How could you impose these kinds of scriptures on us today? You see, it's important to recognize that these scriptures were written thousands of years apart. When Paul wrote these 3 scriptures here, that was 1,500 to 2,000 years separated him from these scriptures. So Paul had that problem too. These were written to highly different cultures also. It's not just a cultural issue. These were written to highly different cultures. They're written in different languages, written to different audiences. So what does this tell us? Well, it just shows us that on some issues, biblically and doctrinally, on some issues, these things supersede time and culture. And sexual ethics is one of those things. And so how God felt about sexual ethics 4,000 years ago is how God felt about sexual ethics 2,000 years ago. It's how God feels about sexual ethics today. And if any of us are, and not any of us, but if anybody's walking this earth 2,000 years from now, we haven't blown each other up by then that is still how God will feel about sexual ethics. And so I hold to what is called the traditional biblical sexual ethic. What is that? That sexual intimacy is to be reserved between that of a man and a woman bound together only in marriage. And anything outside of those confines is not representative of what God intended for human sexuality, whether it's homosexual activity or heterosexual activity. That is what God wanted for sexuality. Now, that's not a popular message today. And the younger you are, the more you realize that, and especially if you're in high school or college or whatever, you know, you're a crazy person if you believe this kind of stuff. And so I've seen all of those signs. In fact, don't listen to Guy. I was speaking at a event in Portland, Maine. I can't remember, somewhere in Maine. It was at the University of Southern Maine. And so the university asked me to come and teach on this issue. And the gay rights movement on campus heard that a pastor from Canada was coming to speak on the issues of Christianity and homosexuality. So the gay rights movement on campus prejudged me and assumed that I was going to be coming with a message of bigotry and hatred. And like I was there to slam homosexuals, something, of course, which would never even crossed my mind, but that's what they assumed I was going to be doing. And so they tried to get the event canceled. And they couldn't get it canceled. And so the gay rights movement on campus printed up all these T-shirts that said, "Don't listen to Guy" on them, and then passed them out en masse to all these students at the University of Southern Maine. They had no idea who Guy was. They didn't know what Guy was going to say. They didn't know anything about Guy. all they knew is it's a free t-shirt, and of course campus students will wear anything. So even before I got there was all these kids wearing these t-shirts that said "Don't listen to Guy" on them. And so anyway, I went to the event. There were some protesters there. They yelled and screamed and called me a bigot and everything else, and they all wore the t-shirts, and it was a beautiful thing. But I decided to take that seemingly negative thing and turn it into a positive thing. Site called don'tlistentoguy.com. And I said, if you want to fight, if you want to yell at me, if you want to say that I'm an idiot, I'm a bigot, I'm a homophobe, whatever, say whatever you want. But instead of loading up my inbox with it, could you just please go to don'tlistentoguy.com and say all your bad stuff there? And so that's been a very active site. But you can actually go there and say something nice too. If you like what you heard today, if you have any comments on today, just go to don'tlistentoguy.com and you can put it there. In fact, we even came up with our own line of Don't Listen to Guy apparel. We have now Don't Listen to Guy t-shirts. I don't have any with me on this trip, but I now sell Don't Listen to Guy t-shirts, and my kids love wearing them, actually. Yeah. So here's the thing. On the stuff that we're going to be discussing today, I recognize that these things are really controversial issues. I really applaud you as a church for having the courage and the faith to discuss the things we're going to be discussing today. Because these things are controversial. They are multifaceted. They are difficult to understand. They're not popular. It's not a popular discussion. And so I appreciate the senior leadership of this church for having the courage to say, yeah, it's not popular, but we need to discuss it, so let's do this. There's a lot of churches who don't want anything to do with me because it's too controversial. And sometimes, as I said, protesters show up and churches are like, I don't want to risk that. So I don't know if there's any protesters here today, but it doesn't look like. I don't even see any signs yet. No one's throwing anything, so we're doing good so far. Oh, there we go. See, I knew. One protester so far. Oh my gosh. Okay. So, anyway, here's the thing. On the issues that we're going to be discussing today, the truth is I don't have all the answers. You're going to leave here today with questions that you're going to, I thought this is what I always wanted to know, and I thought he would be able to tell me, and he didn't. Yeah, I'm sorry. You see, the truth is on the issues that we're discussing for the next while together, the truth is, I myself have to be willing to live within the tensions of uncertainty on the issues that we're discussing. And so I don't have all the answers either. But here's one thing I would like to think that we could all agree on, that we all think, yeah, this is right, and that is this. Every person needs to be treated with dignity, kindness, and respect. Amen. Doesn't matter what they believe. Doesn't matter how they choose to live their lives. Doesn't matter what the response to Jesus is. Every person needs to be treated with dignity, kindness, and respect. You see, I seem to be in the unenviable position of having everybody mad at me, because I've had the gay rights movement protest me and attack me. And then I've been at events where Christians have gotten up and walked out because they don't like the process that I follow and some of the thoughts and feelings I have on this issue on how we should be dealing with this as Christians. So, that's fine. I recognize that we may end up disagreeing on some things. So I'm going to say some things here today. You're going to be like, whoa, I can't believe you just said that. I so disagree with that. That's fine. Great. We don't have all the answers figured out yet. So we'll end up disagreeing. I think on the traditional biblical sexual ethic, most of us in this room will probably end up agreeing on that. But in terms of process and how to deal with this within our communities, that we may end up disagreeing on. And I don't know most of you here, so I'll just say that while I'm assuming that most of us are churchgoers, it is possible that somebody is here today who comes from a gay background or is involved in a homosexual lifestyle or is a pro-gay proponent. If there is anyone like that here today, I just want you to know how glad I am you're here for having the courage to come to this today. And I also want you to know how sorry I am that people have treated you the way you've been treated. Most people in the gay community would say that people who called themselves Christians at one time or another said and did things to them that were very painful and hurtful. And I can tell you that a lot of people who call themselves Christians, not everybody, of course, I can't paint everybody with the same broad brush, but it is true that a lot of people who call themselves Christians have said and done things in the name of Jesus that Jesus would never say or do. A lot of times people have been terrible ambassadors for Christ on this issue. So if that's been your experience, I want you to know that I believe God's heart broke with yours. And I'm sorry that that's been your experience. So while we may not agree on everything, hopefully this one we can. Who is Guy Hammond and what is his story? This is me when I was, a lot more hair going on there, 16 years old. I don't remember the first time I recognized I was same-sex attracted. probably around the age of 11 or 12. I will tell you as a point of personal history that I was sexually molested by a man when I was 8 years old. How much of a role that would have played in me becoming same-sex attraction or same-sex attracted, I'll never know for certain, but, let's say it certainly didn't help. But it was around the age of 11 or 12 and started acting out with a kid in my neighborhood. That young man actually ended up becoming a boyfriend of mine, and we had a relationship until I was 22 years old. It was really confusing to me in my youth, teen years. Of course, I grew up going to church. The only message I heard at church was that homosexuals were wicked and evil and going to hell. And that was the only message there, not a very holistic one. And then, there was school, and the only thing I heard at school were gay, fag, and queer jokes. And sometimes those were from the teachers. Of course, in the 1970s, so a different world back then. And then there was home. And, my dad made it really clear how I felt about homosexuals. And, it wasn't a positive thing. He thought really badly about them. He was very vocal about that. And so I didn't feel like there was any safe place to go to get any perspective or get any help. And, through my teen years, of course, I had this boyfriend. It was a relationship we had to keep very secret because, again, it was a different world then. 1970s, it wasn't like the world is today. So it was something we had to keep very hidden. Around this age here, when I was 19, around then I was beginning to feel like, I'm tired of church. I'm tired of God. I don't see any help there. I only see judgmentalism. And, I don't know why I'm going anymore. And so I really started to give up on the idea of God and church. It's not that I didn't believe in God. I did. It's just I didn't think he believed in me. And so, I stopped going to church, ended up moving to Toronto in my early 20s. And it was there I thought, I'm just going to live however I want. And really started crossing a lot of dangerous lines. Got involved in the gay life in downtown Toronto. Started acting out with different men. Was involved in many different anonymous sexual encounters with different men. And around the age of 22, for help. And of course, in God's perfect timing, he sent somebody who invited me to church. It was a kid I'd gone to high school with. His name was Kevin Robbins. And Kevin and I had gone to high school together. He had found this new church in downtown Toronto, and he was like, hey, you got to check it out. And I was like, oh, church. I know all about those people. I don't need church anymore. He was like, come on, Guy, come to this church and check it out. And so I did. I was so moved by what I saw and heard there, like the church I grew up in. And I was like, wow, this is something different. So I very quickly, when I went, one of the members said, well, you want to study the Bible and really learn how to become a Christian or how to live as a Christian? I was like, yes, I knew I needed help. I was like, great, study the Bible with me. And so I went through these Bible studies and was baptized, but I was too embarrassed and ashamed to tell anybody who I really was. I thought if I tell these people that I've been living this gay life, I'll be out of here in a heartbeat. And so I'm just going to keep that between God and I. And I'm just going to, really white knuckle it here and really try to never go back to homosexuality again. And so I did good for a couple of months. But of course, whenever you hide sin, things never get better. Things only get worse. And so after a period of months, sure enough, I was back at it again, acting out with men, and now living my life as a Christian at the same time. So just living my life as a complete hypocrite. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is just the worst, And it was actually also during this time that one of the ministers of the church, of course, had no idea how I was living my life really. I had met a girl in the church, and we just become great friends. And one of the ministers suggested we date, and I was like, date? I've never had a girlfriend before. Like, maybe that's my problem. I should try that. Let's see if I have a girlfriend, and let's see how that works. So this girl and I, just a great friend. She was in this Bible discussion group that I belonged to, and every time I went to her house, she would bake me something. That would really impress me. And so what's so funny? Anyway, so I ended up, going to her house all the time. And then I said, hey, you want to be my girlfriend? She said, yes. Of course, this poor girl had no idea who I was or how I was really living. We dated for a couple of months. And after a couple of months, she was like, you're a lot of fun and I enjoy your company, but something's wrong with you. And I don't know what it is, but I can tell you this, you're certainly not very spiritual. And so she dropped me through the gulps of life, and it was over. And I was like heartbroken. I was like, oh my gosh, I've only ever had one girlfriend and I lost her, And then I just really went downhill spiritually. And one of the ministers pulled me aside and he said, hey, listen, I can tell something's up. Why don't you just tell me what it is? I'll help you out. I said, no, I'm not doing that. He said, come on, talk to me. What is it? I was in his living room. His name was Ken Gidros. He's trying to talk, get me to be open. And it's like, no, I'm not telling you what I'm doing. So he tried this on me, and I'm not saying this is a good thing to do necessarily, but this was his strategy. He said, I'm going to count to 10. And he said, when I get to 10, either you can start telling me how you're really living so I can start helping you, or there's the door, go live your life, and if God lets you live through it, maybe you can go back a few years from now and tell me about it. So he started counting, He gets to 10. I'm like, I am out of here. And when I got on a city bus, I was going to go get all my stuff from this apartment I was living in and go to move downtown Toronto and live my gay life forever. And while I was on the bus, this one thought kept going through my mind. It was like, Guy, you could leave this church and never come back, but how can you turn your back on a man who died for you? Like, can you live the rest of your life knowing you turned your back on a man who died for you? I just knew I couldn't. After 20 minutes of that bus ride, I got off and said, that's it. Then I have to be a Christian, because I cannot live the rest of my life knowing that I would have been so cold as a human being who died for me. So I called this minister back up. I said, okay, I'm ready now. Went back to his house, spilled beans. He was so compassionate and understanding, so helpful. And so I studied the Bible for real that time, really was transparent and honest, brought all my dark deeds into the light, and was baptized on August 15th, 1987. And I can tell you, I have not participated in any kind of homosexual activity since my baptism 30 years ago. So it's remarkable what God has done over the years. One of the things that I never thought would ever happen is that I'd get married, for instance. When I became a Christian, I thought, well, I'm homosexually attracted. I don't know how would I ever get married. I've never been attracted to a girl before. I guess I'll just have to be celibate, which was not like my favorite idea, but I thought, if Jesus can die for me, I can be celibate. So, okay, I'll do that. But after a period of years, I was put on a mission team to start a church in Detroit, Michigan. And while I was there, I started to feel lonely. And remember that girl I told you about who I dated a few years earlier, drop kicked me through the goalposts of life? I thought, wow, because she's the only girl I've ever been interested in. And so I called her up and said, hey, do you remember me? She was like, oh yeah, I remember you. And anyway, we started dating again, and Kathy and I were married on February 23rd, 1991. And she's just been the greatest blessing in my life. We've been married now for 27 years. I tell her it's been the best 10 years of my life, and it's just been, that was a joke. 10 years. Okay, great. So then not only that, as if God hasn't done that, I have a family. In fact, my daughter Ellie is here with me today. And she'll be the one selling my books over here that all you guys are going to buy in a few minutes. And anyway, so yeah, this is my son, Wyatt. Wyatt is 23 years old. And so I don't know how many of you know of this. This is new to our lives too. But actually, my wife, Kathy, just a few months ago was diagnosed with stage 4 brain cancer. And so Kathy we've basically been given less than a year to live. Normally she travels with me. That's why she's not here with me right now. And so we as a family, are heartbroken and really struggling right now, quite honestly. Normally Kathy travels with me, but I have Ellie here with me, which is fantastic. So Wyatt, he was studying criminology at the University of Toronto, but postponed school for a year so he could be up where we live to help. Ellie, who's with us today, was at grad school at Carleton University and has also postponed school for a year, and she's now moved to where we live, in the little town we live in Ontario, and has a job at Shoppers Drug Mart and is there just to be able to serve and help her mom. And so super grateful for the sacrifice that my kids are making while we go through this as a family. This is my son, Greg. Greg is 19 years old, and the only thing he's interested in the entire world is cars. His first car 2 weeks ago because he needed it to get to and from school because he was going to school in Barrie, far from where we live, and he had the car for 1 week and he totaled it. And that was just last week. And so as if my wife dying of cancer isn't enough, my son totals his car. I hope you guys feel sorry for me because we've been going through a lot, right? But that car is crashing. Anyway, he is totally fine. He wasn't hurt. It's just I wanted to strangle his neck afterwards after he crashed the car. And then this is my daughter, Kristen. Kristen is 20 years old, and she's, interested only in the most important things in life, like jewelry and makeup. And so, anyway, we actually adopted Greg and Kristen. We adopted them 10 years ago, almost 11 years ago now, when we lived in Halifax. And they come from a very broken past. Those poor kids have seen more than any child should ever have to go through by the time they were 10. it's not been easy adopting them into our family, but we love them, and there's been a lot of doctors and therapists and medications, and we had help for the kids too. So it's been that's our family. So anyway, so this is my ministry, strength and weakness. And the ministry started when I was just, thought I wanted to be able to start helping people. I just recognized that there was nothing in place. Our church and Church of Christ in general had nothing in place to be able to help people with my background. And I thought, well, let me start a website and see if I can find a few people. And so I started this website. My initial goal is to find 30. I thought if I could find 30 Christians who are same-sex attracted, that would be amazing, like 30. And how would I even help 30 people? I was like, that'd be amazing. And so I started the website, but we found 30 in the first week. And then after a month, that was past 100. And then within a couple months, it was past 500. And by the end of the year, we were past 1,000. So the ministry has just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and become so much more than we ever imagined or ever thought that it would be. And so in the last 10 years since starting this ministry, we've now helped thousands of Christians in 58 countries around the world. And I now have a volunteer staff of same-sex attracted Christians and parents of same-sex attracted children who help me run the ministry. And we have a singles ministry, campus ministry, teen ministry, transgender ministry. We're helping Christians, especially our youth, who are in today's culture are questioning things about transgender. I've got a guy in my ministry who lived as a woman for 6 years, then became a Christian, now lives his life as a man again, and runs my transgender ministry. So we're trying to be a service to Christians around the world to be able to tackle these really difficult and challenging issues. And so that's the ministry. So, please go there and check it out because there's so much information there. It's all free. It's just all available. In fact, the ministry got so big a few years ago that my wife and I were leading the church in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And then I was just like, I can't do both anymore. Like, I'm working, 50 hours a week for the church, and then I'm working 50 hours a week running this thing. And I was like, I can't keep living like this. And so we thought, well, something's got to go. And I thought, there's a lot of people who could lead a church in Halifax, Nova Scotia, but I didn't know anybody else who could do this ministry. At least if there is somebody else, they weren't volunteering. And so I thought, okay, I'll do this. So we quit our jobs. But the trouble was that we had no money. We just quit our jobs. So actually another ministry here in Canada called me up. He said, quitting your job, leading the church in Halifax to do this strength and weakness thing of yours? I said, yeah. He said, so let me get this straight. Let me ask you a couple questions. How old are you? I said, 54. He said, and you have a mortgage to pay? Yeah. And car payment? Yeah. And 4 kids? Yeah. And 2 kids with special needs? Yeah. University? Yeah. And you're quitting your job? Yeah. He said, how much support have you got? Oh, I said, no, we don't have any support. How much money have you got? No, we don't have any money. He says, are you crazy? And then I got really insecure. Being faithful. But I thought, crazy, faithful, it doesn't matter. God's going to catch us, right? I just figured if it's the Lord's will, it's the Lord's bill. He's going to have to catch us. So, in fact, at this very time, actually, Greg and Josie, who are here today, were my next door neighbors. And this was all happening right as, them and becoming friends, and I was the minister of the church there that Greg and Joseph were coming to, and it was right as I was starting this ministry and getting things going. Of course, they had no idea what their next door neighbor was up to, but anyway, I'm so glad to see those guys here, and so glad that they've been so warmly received and loved here in the church, and I know you guys are glad to have them. So yeah, the Greg and Joseph are our neighbors, and they weren't really good neighbors, but just only because Greg would never shovel he'd always have Josie out there doing all the shoveling, right? And then in the heat of the day, Josie's out there cutting the grass, Greg's on the porch having a drink. I'm like, do something for the woman, for pity's sakes. No, that's not completely true. Okay, so anyway, that's the ministry. So I'll tell you a couple of things that our ministry has to offer you guys, just to give you tools and resources to help on these really multifaceted issues. One thing that happened a couple of years ago that caught me off guard is I said the ministry's become more than I ever thought it would be. But anyway, I got a phone call from ICOC Hot News, which I don't know if you're familiar with, but they make a lot of little movies and stuff like that, 10-minute videos and stuff like that of what's happening around the world. And so they called me up and said, we want to make our very first feature-length movie. And, we want to make the movie about your life. And I was like, seriously? Like, who would watch that? I don't even want to watch that. But anyway, so for the last 2 years, a film crew has been following me around as I travel around the world, making a movie. And the movie just was released. And it's right now, being sold to churches. So several hundred churches have already bought the movie just to be able to show in front of churches. And then in about February, it's going to be sold on iTunes and Amazon for like $20, and you can just buy it yourself. But a really good resource just to, again, be able to help educate and train yourself on all these issues. So I thought I would show you just the trailer. It's like a 2-minute trailer. So I would show you the trailer to the movie. The movie is called Finding Guy. I didn't come up with the title. Don't give me a hard time. This is the trailer to Finding Guy.
I'll never forget the very first time someone invited me to come and speak on the issue of homosexuality. When I arrived at the event, there were angry protesters everywhere. The 200-seat auditorium was completely packed. Many would even shake my hand or look at me. By the time I had finished my talk, dozens of hands shot up. The room got louder. Some people started shouting. Some were booing. So I just pointed at random to one of the hands at the back of the room. The woman stood up. She introduced herself as the president of the LGBT organization that had planned the protest. When she said, yeah, my house was right here. This was my neighborhood. A lot of things happened in our home that no kid should have to experience. Yeah, it's emotional. It's emotional coming back here again. We tried to project the image of the perfect Christian family, but behind closed doors, something completely different was going on. I was a preteen when I first realized that I was attracted to guys. At school, I heard kids throwing around gay, fag, and queer jokes. At church, the only message I heard was how gay people were wicked and evil and going to hell. In a vain attempt to find fulfillment, I started having anonymous encounters with men I met in places like the change room of my local gym, parked cars, and going gay hangouts. I felt God had let me down. Didn't he see what I was going through? Didn't he care? So what was I to do with God in the church now?
I won't take any more time. Without any further ado, Guy Hammond.
So what's been happening, though, for the last 50 years is that these two groups, the gay rights movement and Jesus' church, have been going like this. We've been arguing against each other. There's been no reasonable conversation.
I've been verbally attacked, laughed at, mocked, protested, threatened, lied about online and in the press. I can tell you it's been both a humbling and a humiliating experience.
I think one of the challenges is sometimes we're not convinced that Jesus is that amazing. We have to be convinced that Jesus changes lives.
So anyway, like I said, the movie's out now, and it's $149 for a church to buy it. You can show it as many times you want, in whatever format you want, and that's out now. So anyway, but I will say, I was skeptical at first when this movie, but God's timing is impeccable, because the movie is coming out at a time in our lives when my wife can no longer travel, and with a life expectancy of under a year, but a ministry that I still need to lead. So normally Kathy comes with me and she talks and she shares her things too, but she can't now. So the movie is going to be able to travel for us. And Guy and Kathy Hammond can't get into these churches around the world like we thought we were going to be able to, but for $149, the movie can. So we're grateful for God allowing this to come up when it does, and hopefully we'll be able to help a lot of people. Here's some of the books that my daughter Ellie here at the table is going to be selling. That's the first book I ever wrote, called Carrying Beyond the Margins. What every Christian needs to know about homosexuality. Really break things down very succinctly and clearly for you, and really does, as a lot of what we'll do today, answer a lot of your questions. This book here is just 6 Bible studies I wrote. If you're ever going to study the Bible with someone who's gay, this doesn't replace your current Bible study protocol or whatever you do when you're trying to help people become Christians, but you would just insert this and use this as a guide to be able to help you. So if you're going to study the Bible with somebody from a gay background who's a pro-gay proponent, it's just a little booklet. It's just a little tiny thing. It's like $7 or $8. And that pretty much answers all the questions that people have. And takes all the guesswork out of you, like, oh my goodness, this person comes from a gay background. I don't know what to say. Great. You know, have this in your library. If you haven't studied the Bible with somebody who's gay yet, you're going to. And you would find that book really helpful. The next book I wrote was this one here, Tempt Away, How to Defeat Every Temptation in Under 60 Seconds. This has become actually one of the best sellers that Illumination Publishers has ever had, because everybody wants to defeat temptation in under 60 seconds. But the other part of the book is called How to Recover Quickly When You Don't. I recognized around 10 years ago, I thought, I'm not doing really good overcoming temptation. I don't really have a plan. There's no strategy. I'm just kind of letting life happen to me. And I thought, I have to do better than this. So I came up with a strategy of how to overcome temptation, and I needed to be something that I could initiate quickly and easily and work all day long. So I've just been using this for the last 10 years, and I was speaking at an event in Boston a few years ago, and one of the elders said to me, defeat any temptation under 60 seconds. You should write a book about that, because like, we all want to be able to do that. I was like, oh, great. So anyway, that's the book, How to Defeat Every Temptation Under 60 Seconds. This book here is called Messed Up. Proof that you're more to God than your mistakes. And if you've messed up your life, if you've made mistakes in your life that you can't forgive yourself for, or others aren't forgiving you for, if you've done something that maybe no one else even knows about yet, and you just can't seem to get over it, maybe it was recent, maybe it was 20, 30 years ago. Trust me, from somebody who's an expert at messing his life up, but is still standing. This book will really, really help you. Messed Up, Proof That You're More to God Than Your Mistakes. And then finally, this one. This just came out last month, actually. Return to Sender. A series of stories of biblical figures who were washed up, wiped out, nobody could care about anymore, and God went on and did amazing things with their lives. So anyway, all those books are available here, and if you get a book, it obviously supports our ministry. So any help you can be there would be great. So this is normally the time when I say, hey, my wife Kathy is going to come up and say a few words. But again, the movie has been a blessing in the sense that she's in the movie, and so since she couldn't be here today, and this is the first workshop I've done since we found out Kathy has cancer. In fact, we basically canceled all of our speaking gigs. We were supposed to be in Brazil for 3 weeks, go to the Philippines. We just canceled all our trips, and but I said I want to go to Calgary, and so we kept that one on. So Ellie is here with me, and we have Wyatt back home. Kathy's sister went to help out for a few days while I'm here. And I thought, well, since Kathy can't be here, I'll show you a section of the movie where she is in it. This is a small section. It'll run about 5 minutes, maybe 4 minutes. But this is the scene of the movie where I asked Kathy if she is willing to date me again after previously her, dumping me, and kind of explains how she felt about the whole issue. So I thought I would share that with you guys. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay, great.
When I became a Christian, my whole life was starting over, and it was great. The church really protected me, loved me, and I built some amazing friendships. And I knew that my life had to change in dramatic ways if I was to stay faithful and not go back to homosexuality. I needed to start living my life on purpose and establish some self-imposed boundaries. There were certain places I just couldn't go back to, activities I could never allow myself to participate in again. I was also finally honest with my struggles and temptations with my old friend Mike. One of the most difficult costs to count in becoming a Christian was that I could never be romantically involved with another man. But I knew that I didn't want to spend my life alone. So how was that going to be possible if it had to be with a woman? I mean, I had never even been attracted to a girl before. And when I dated Kathy years earlier, she's the one who broke up with me. But I couldn't get her out of my mind. If I was ever to have a partner in life, I knew she was the one. So I started praying daily. God, I know I don't deserve this, but please, God, keep Kathy for me, and I promise that I'll love her like no one else can. I prayed that prayer hundreds of times for over 2 years. Then one day, I finally opened my mouth.
We were at a singles retreat when Guy asked me out. And everything in me screamed, no, I can't do this again. In fact, to this day, I'm sure I said no. But he carried on as if I'd said yes. And so a little while later, we met for coffee, and we knew this time would be very different.
So soon we started dating again. We loved going on walks, sharing our dreams, going to ball games, hockey games, dinner, the movies. And of course, we both had this deep desire to follow Jesus. I mean, she'd become my best friend. Even though I knew I wasn't attracted to Kathy the way a heterosexually attracted man would be, I knew I loved her and couldn't imagine living my life without her. As our friendship escalated into engagement, I knew I had to tell her about my situation. It was a pretty scary moment. I was afraid, of course, that she would reject me, and who could blame her?
When Guy first told me about his past, I was sad. Sad that he had been lonely and that he'd carried this secret for so long. But then I felt betrayed, and I got angry, and I was fearful. What if he was marrying me as an experiment? We could never have a normal physical relationship. What if he had AIDS? And for me, the biggest one was, what if he decided down the road that he would rather be with a man? At that point, Guy had not acted out in over 2 years. So I had to ask myself, if he's this committed to righteousness, do I really care if he's attracted to men or if he's attracted to women, as long as he's being faithful to me? And that was the point I realized, I love this man and I can trust that he will continue to be a spiritual man.
We both decided then and there that we would refuse to allow my same-gender attractions to be something that would define our relationship. Our wedding day was incredible. I'll never forget standing there at the front of that church as she walked down the aisle. As the congregation stood and the music played, I thanked God then and there for answering my prayers. Now, I understand that many same-sex attracted Christian men and women will never want to marry, and I respect that choice. It's not for everyone, but for Guy Hammond, marrying Kathy was the greatest decision of my life.
All right. Yeah. So, you know, an obvious question, and one we get a lot is, how is it possible for a homosexually attracted man and a heterosexually attracted woman to be happily married for 27 years? How does that work? And I'll tell you, we really do have an amazing marriage. I really have made it my goal every single day, recognizing how blessed I am to have a wife. My wife feel like $1,000,000 every day. Now, there are days I only make her feel like a couple $100,000, but it's not that bad. You know, marriage over the years, we've really just given ourselves over to the countercultural, yet biblical truth. Love is best expressed when we can focus on what we can give to one another, rather than focusing on what we can get from one another. You see, if we focus on what we can get, and if I did that in my marriage, I'd be left sorely disappointed because I'm homosexually attracted and she's a woman. But if I focus my measure of success as a man and as a husband and a provider on what I can give, see, I can do that all day long. My goal is I want my wife to feel loved, cherished, special, valued, and that makes me successful, then that one's easy for me. And so we've just really focused on that. The other thing I would say is that in today's culture, so much is focused on when it comes to relationships on the sexual aspect. And I would say, and for any of those of us who have been married for any length of time, you know, our world is so messed up on this issue. as if sexual attraction, physical attraction, is the defining factor of a relationship that should determine whether it's successful or not. But I think we all know after you've been married for 5 or 10 years, like everything kind of goes south, right? I mean, in terms of how you look, I mean, and it just does. I mean, if you're going to focus on physical attraction, well, in a period of years, you're not going to be that physically attracted to each other. Chances are, at least as you were when you started out, way more to a relationship with that than that. So being a man who's not physically attracted to my wife the way a heterosexually attracted man would be, we recognize that what we're going to focus on is intimacy. You see, you can live in a relationship without sex, but you cannot live without intimacy. And so we have focused on being emotionally relational, spiritually relational, and just really being best friends. And then, of course, spiritually relational. And so these things have really allowed us and helped us to really have a healthy and good marriage over the years. I tell Kathy all the time that she's the most beautiful woman in the world to me. And that is true. People will be like, well, Guy, how can that be? Because you're not even attracted to Kathy. But I look at it like this, and I tell other same-sex attracted men and women who are married, this is how they should look at it. Listen, I can tell my wife she's beautiful even though I'm not attracted to her, because just attraction doesn't mean that you can't appreciate beauty. Like, for instance, I was in Banff yesterday with my sister, Becky. And she lives here in Calgary. She took us out to Banff. And I looked at the mountains and I was like, God, you're amazing. Look what you've created, right? I mean, you can't help it but look at that stunning beauty and appreciate what a beautiful thing God created. Now, I'm not sexually attracted to the mountains, but I can tell you that I can appreciate its beauty, and I can say, God, look what you did. It's amazing, right? I can look at a rose and appreciate the fact that it's delicate and intricate and beautiful, and it smells pretty. Now, I'm not sexually attracted to the rose, but I can appreciate how beautiful it is, and that's how it is with Kathy. I'm not sexually attracted to Kathy the way a heterosexually attracted man would be, but that doesn't mean I can't appreciate the beauty. That doesn't mean I can't appreciate how delicate she is, how beautiful she is, that, like the rose, she smells pretty. And I can look at her and say, wow, God, look what you made for me. This is amazing. And it's with that heart and that attitude in our marriage these last 27 years that has really allowed us to have an amazing time together. So I'll say before we close off our class, just got a few other things I want to cover and we'll be done. Have a short break. But please, thank you for those of you who have been praying for us, thank you for that. I want you to know that Kathy is the happiest dying person I've ever met in my life. She is at peace. She is preparing for heaven. She's even looking forward to that. I think she feels bad for our kids and for me because she knows that she's going to be leaving us. But she really is she's just a remarkable, remarkable person. And she's doing a lot better than I am, quite frankly. And so thank you for praying for her, but please keep doing so. Too. So let's do a couple of quick things here, and then we'll be done. We'll have a break. And then we'll go on with our second class. Terminology. Terminology is important. What I say, words that you use and words that I use mean different things. And so let's just cover a couple things here. You'll notice that I've never called myself gay, and I don't call myself a homosexual or say that I'm homosexually attracted. Why is that? What is the difference between these two terms here? Because I do call myself same-sex attracted or same-gender attracted. Why is that? Well, because gay and homosexual, these are identity markers for people who choose to celebrate that lifestyle. It's an identity marker to them, and they don't consider it a moral issue, okay? And so, clearly, I don't want what I'm attracted to be an identity marker for me. There's so much more to my life than what I'm attracted to. Who cares? That's just one small piece of me. I want my identity to be Jesus, not what I'm attracted to, and I don't celebrate homosexuality, and it is a moral issue to me, and I haven't participated in 30 years. So, no, I will not call myself that, because I don't want to infer something that is not real. Sex attracted, and for the reasons I just said, it's not an identity marker for me. So that is the difference between the two. And I try to encourage Christians, listen, just don't use that word. Hey, I'm a gay Christian. You're just telling people something that they're thinking you are and you're not. And so I encourage people to use that other terminology. Is there a genetic cause for homosexuality? Well, that's a big one. So let me give you the absolute most recent and up-to-date information available on whether homosexuality is caused by genetics. We have no idea. We don't know. If somebody comes to you and says, no, Guy, I saw a study, and it does prove that people are born gay. If somebody tells you that, you need to ask where they got the study from. And it needs to come from somewhere other than yahoo.com. Because I can tell you the study doesn't exist. We don't know yet. In fact, I'll tell you what the American Psychological Association said in 2009. This continues to be their stance. And they are, by the way, a very pro-gay leaning group. They say, although much research has examined the possible genetic, hormonal, developmental, social, and cultural influences on sexual behavior, no findings have emerged that permit scientists to conclude is determined by any particular factor or factors, the American Psychological Association. And I'll tell you that a new study came out just in 2016, put out by the Mayo Clinic, and they, just in 2016, the study's only a year old, came out with the same findings. The Mayo Clinic still says that science has yet to prove that homosexuality is caused by genetics, okay? So we don't know. When people say, I was born that way, you know, well, I understand why you may feel that way, but you really weren't, or at least if you were, science hasn't proven that way. So I can tell you, though, as a same-sex attracted man, it does feel natural. So when people say, Guy, no, I was born this way, I get it. I understand. Because you don't choose what you're attracted to. None of you chose what you're attracted to. I just discovered what I was attracted to. I didn't choose it. And if I could have changed it by now, trust me, I would have. Attractions are very automatic and involuntary. You have very little say about what you're attracted to. Okay? So now we are 100% responsible for what we do with our attractions. That we're responsible for. In and of themselves, as I said, they're very automatic and involuntary. You have very little say over that. So when people say, Guy, I feel like I was born this way, I understand. But I will also say this. I think for the Christian, our ability to choose supersedes genetics. So let's say science does conclude it's a genetically based trait. Okay, for the Christian, I don't know why that would matter. In fact, I'm very open to the fact that homosexuality is caused by genetics. Okay, I don't have a problem with that. I'm just saying science hasn't proven it yet the way people try to say it is. But if the Mayo Clinic comes along and says, hey, we did it, we found the gay gene, it's for real. Okay, great. Christian supersedes my genetics. Nor in the Bible does it say a man shall not lie with another man, for that is detestable. Unless, of course, you were born that way, in case, go ahead and do it. No, it just, God just says, don't do it. Just like, you know, nowhere in the Bible does it say, thou shalt not lie. Unless, of course, there's a genetic reason why you're lying, in which case, lie your brains out. No, God just says, lying is not a healthy lifestyle. I don't want that for you. Don't do it, right? So it doesn't matter that it's genetic. Able to choose supersedes that. But I'll also say this. I'll talk about this more in our next class. But I actually support the rights of gay and transgender people to pursue their dreams. I don't think it's any of my business. I don't think it's the Christian's business to start judging everybody else how they want to live. Well, as I said, we'll discuss this more in our next class. But this is the point when some people get up and walk out. People are free to live however they want. I think it's one of the greatest gifts God has given mankind is that you and I have the freedom to live however we want. To be robots. He's given us his Bible. He says, this is the owner's manual. Live this way and you'll have an amazing life. Don't live this way and you're going to hurt yourself a lot. But you're free to live however you want. I don't want you to be involved in heterosexual activity outside of marriage or homosexuality. But if you choose to do that, okay, there will be consequences for that. But go live however you want. God's given us the ability to choose. So I don't think it's my place as a Christian to judge other people, look down on people, and feel bad about people because of a choice that they're free to be able to make. Now, if they want to come and have a spiritual conversation with an open Bible, great. That's no problem. I can show them what the Bible says. Prepare you for that. But I just think that, you know, people are free to live whatever they want, and it's not my place to judge them. For the Christian, what about the Christian who's same-sex attracted? Well, for the Christian, the opposite of homosexuality is not heterosexuality. For the Christian, the opposite of homosexuality is holiness. And I tell Christians attracted, and they act as if the number one goal in life in Christianity is that they have to become heterosexually attracted. And they get on this treadmill of trying to change what they're attracted to. I personally believe that does nothing but impoverishes people's faith. God cares what you're attracted to. Who cares? So what? Listen, when I was a kid, I always thought to myself as I was growing up, I thought, oh, I just want to become normal like everyone else. You know what? Now I realize at the age of 54, none of you are normal either. Like, we're all just a big mess, right? And so there is no normal. God doesn't care what you're attracted to. Listen, if you're same-sex attracted, who cares? So what? Don't let that bring you down. You need to go do something great for God. Take this area of brokenness and struggle in your life and go do something great for God. Who cares what you're attracted to? So what? For the Christian, the opposite of homosexuality is not heterosexuality. Holiness. Do the best you can to live a holy life. Trust in God's grace when you fail. Go do something great with your life. Who cares what you're attracted to? That's what I believe on that one. Is change possible? Yeah, change is possible. But a lot of times, change comes in ways we don't often expect. A lot of times we hope and pray for a change to come in a certain way. And, you know, I know, as I said, I spent a lot of years wanting to become heterosexually attracted. And, you know, after this many years of a Christian now, I know that's not going to change. That's okay. Changes come in other ways. I spent the first 20 years of my life terrified to talk about this to anybody. And if you had told me that I would be traveling around the world and by now I would have spoken to 80,000 people talking about this in my life, I would have said you absolutely lost your mind. Not possible, because I couldn't even, for a period of years, even really talk to Kathy about it. I was so ashamed and embarrassed. So change has happened, change in faith, change in courage. Sometimes the Holy Spirit just works in different ways than we would like him to. In 2001, Russell Crowe portrayed the Hollywood version of American mathematician and winner of the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences, a guy by the name of John Forbes Nash Jr., in a movie called A Beautiful Mind. I don't know if you've seen that movie, but it's a great movie. You should definitely go and see it. As a young man, John Nash was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and spent periods of time in psychiatric institutions due to the delusions that he often suffered. And near the end of the movie portrayal, John Nash is asked if his visions had ever left him. And I love his response, because if I was ever to be asked, same-sex attractions ever left me, I'd come close to the same response we hear John Nash give. He said, they're not gone, and maybe they never will be. But I've gotten used to ignoring them, and as a result, I think they're giving up on me. And see, I think that's what it's like with all of our dreams, all of our lives. You know, the thing that you feed is the thing that stays alive. In the final scene of the movie interpretation, John Nash gives his acceptance speech for the Nobel Prize. And here he says, quote, I've always believed in numbers, in equations that lead to logic and reason. But after a lifetime of such pursuits, I ask, what is logic? And who decides reason? My quest has taken me from the physical, the delusional, and back. And I've made the most important discovery of my life, the most important discovery of my career. It is only in the mysterious equations of love that any logical reasons can be found. Similarly, in Guy Hammond's life, my quest for fulfillment has taken me to, well, many places. And I've made the most important discovery of my life. It is only in the mysterious equations of following Christ, obedience, and faith that any long-lasting fulfillment of the soul can ever be realized. So guys, thank you. That was our first class together. And we're going to take a break, stretch our legs, maybe come back in like 10 minutes. We'll have our second class. I'm here to answer any questions. And Dr. Kathy, thanks, everybody.
So I have to get the internet, download the app, one bar, so it activates, which is really important. For my bio, I don't want to sign up for their online stuff, so I have to use the online world. I can't even open books without using it. Probably have to spend then I'll stand here for the next hour up. Yeah, like PC. I got one too. My Xbox Oh, I'm not a huge fan. I'm not a huge fan. My Microsoft profile. I guess that's my Xbox Live profile. It's working on my Xbox One. None of the profiles are working. So I use good sign in. It just stays in. So you can circle. It's just down. He's gone. They came out here down an hour later. And he's got stuff wrong with his profile. So I went all I can do profiles. So my next one, and both these he was like, oh. So I tried my profile. I tried putting around one. Yeah, nothing's lost yet. So maybe there was nothing recently and it's just well, yeah, but I mean, it's emails. The games themselves are just profiles. Let me yeah, you can't look at it's like or something like that. And I'm like,
Is that all the books? It's really long. You did? Yeah, well, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna take my stuff. Well, I don't get up there. I know it's not sick. What about stress? I go to bed at 11.
So hard. At some point, it is good yesterday. Oh, yeah, wheelbarrow. What books? This is what we did. And here,
That's not stable.
It's on that tray.
Yes. Of course, we're going to start about 1 minute here. I was saying that what I'm trying to do is not my identity. It's just my identity. People call themselves the sexual identity, right? And it's not good. And that's why they Christians are in okay, great. No problem. Yes, you too, man. Thank you. You're welcome. Yeah, you're welcome. Yes. Good to meet you. Yes. All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and get started here. All right. We're going to talk here about strategies on sharing our faith with gay and lesbian people. I would like to also start by saying that, remember what I said at the very, very beginning, I don't have all the answers. I don't have it all figured out. This is a tough gig for sure. If you want to try to convert somebody from a life of homosexuality to Christianity, it is not an easy thing, but not an impossible thing. And so I'm hoping that today will give you some strategies and hopefully give you a little bit of courage when it comes to sharing our faith with people. But you might, as you hear me talk, oh, I've got a better way than that. Or here's something you should definitely add to your presentation, because have you ever thought of this? I'm wide open to learning. Like I said, I don't have it all figured out either. So here's the first thing I would just like to point out when it comes to dealing with people in the gay community. A lot of times it's very easy for us to look at things like homosexuality like it's an issue. And I would like to suggest that when we as Christians talk about homosexuality, we don't talk about it like it's an issue, because what we're really doing is we're talking about people. We're just talking about human beings, just regular folks. Right. A lot of times it's easy for us to stereotype entire groups of people based on what we see on the news or different experiences that we might have had, and then just class everybody into the stereotype. And so when it comes to instances like the gay community, it can be easy to think, well, everybody who's gay, is wants to fight and argue on the issue, wants to be on a float in the gay parade in their underwear, and it's just really difficult to deal with. And that would not be the case at all. In fact, most gay people, are just regular folks, right? They just want to go to school, write their exams, go to work, contribute to their communities. They've got bills to pay, moms and dads, brothers and sisters. They're just regular folks. They don't want to fight and argue or give you a hard time. They're just, look, can I just live my life, and that's most gay people. And so I just want us to recognize we're not talking about an issue. We're talking about human beings that God values and cares about greatly. So it can be easy for us to stereotype. Now, it can be easy for us to stereotype people in the gay community, and it's also easy for people in the gay community to stereotype us. And they can call us bigots and say we don't care, and call us homophobes and any number of things. And so this is what has been happening between these two groups, Jesus' church and the gay community, now for the last 50 years. We've just been arguing against each other, and we've stereotyped each other. And I would like to think that there is a way for us to be able to dialogue on this issue where we can lift up the love, mercy, and compassion of Jesus and hold to the biblical sexual ethic. I don't think we have to wipe them out. So this is something that we hear this saying all the time, and I've used it before. It's a very common saying that a lot of Christians like to use. Well, I love the sinner, but I hate the sin. And that's a real common line when it comes specifically to this issue of homosexuality. But I would like to suggest that when it comes to this issue in particular, homosexuality, it's probably not the best line to use. Because I can tell you that anybody from the gay community only hears one word in that sentence, and it's the word hate. A famous Christian comedian and author by the name of Mark Lowry says it this way. He says, how about love the sinner, hate your own sin? I hate your sin. There's too many of you. Hating my sin is a full-time job. How about you hate your sin, I'll hate my sin, and we'll just love one another. Right? It's probably a better way for us to be able to deal with it. The Apostle Paul addresses this a little bit in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 12. He says, what business is it of mine to judge those outside the church? He then goes on to say, we should judge those inside the church. What does the word here, judge, means? It means to approve or disapprove. So the Apostle Paul says, what business is it of mine to judge anyone who's not a Christian, approve or disapprove of any way that they live their lives? Yeah. And, what does it look like when we judge people who aren't Christians that live the standards that we don't think is what God would approve of. Well, let me talk. Of course, I'm a huge hockey fan. And of course, the greatest hockey team in the world is the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yes, of course.
And so, hey, they're in second place right now. Yesterday, they were in first place. And I don't get to say that very much in my life. So, okay, so anyway, wouldn't it be strange? Tonight, the Toronto Maple Leafs are playing the hated Ottawa Senators. Wouldn't it be strange tonight if in the dressing room at the Air Canada Centre, the Leafs were looking around the room before the game, they said, where's Guy Hammond? How come he isn't here for tonight's game? And they got upset about that. You know why that would be weird? Because I'm not on the team. Why would they expect me to be there to play when, you know, I've never joined the team before? Now, let's say the Toronto Maple Leafs were actually desperate enough, and they contacted me and they said, Guy, we want you to play for the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'd be like, wow, thank you so much. I'm honored. I can't really skate very well, but either can you. So, hey, guess it's okay. So anyway, I would say, great, show me the contract. I would read the contract, and if I agreed to the terms and conditions of the contract, then I would sign the contract. Now I'm on the team. See, now once I've signed the contract, they have a right to judge me, because I said I would be at practice. I said I'd come to the community events that the team does. I said I would show up on time for the big game. And so if I'm not doing that, see, now they can judge me. But for them to judge me and be down on me to play hockey with them when I haven't even joined the team is ridiculous. You know, if you have somebody in your community or a gay couple who comes to your church, and you're like, wow, I can't believe they're here. This is great. But, you know, you look over and like, I can't believe they live that way. Listen, they never agreed to live to the biblical sexual ethic to begin with. Why would we expect them to? But, you know, if they come to church, what we want to do is we want to get them to call that studying the Bible. And after going through a series of Bible studies, and hey, we sell it. Oh, no, we didn't. And you can get 6 of them here for $8 later. You study the Bible with these people. Then what we want to do is read the contract, and if they agree to the contract, they sign the contract. We call that baptism, and now they're on the team. And the Apostle Paul says, now you have the right to walk alongside a fellow Christian. And when people aren't living up to the standard that we've all been called to, we have a right to call each other higher. We have a right to judge one another. We have a right to, you have a right to come to me and say, Guy, you know, you call yourself a Christian, you were baptized, but, you know, you're not sharing your faith. You don't sacrifice. You were mean to your wife the other day when I saw that. You have every right to come up and say, Guy, let me help you out here. How you acted wasn't representative of how I think a Christian should respond, and so let me help you out. But for somebody who's living a gay life, they never agreed to the standard to begin with, so why would we expect them to? It doesn't really make sense. A lot of times we think when it comes to dealing with difficult issues like this, homosexuality, we think we only have 2 choices. The first choice we have is the standard, repent or perish. Yeah. And we're like, I don't want to do that. And then we think, well, I guess my only other option is just complete approval. But I don't want to do that either, because I know that this is not what the Bible teaches. So I guess I won't say anything. But you see, there is a third option. It's just as that most Christians don't consider it, or if they do, they don't think they have the time to do this, and that is hospitality. You see, hospitality creates room and time. So I'm not suggesting we don't acknowledge difference. Let us acknowledge difference. Let us teach biblical truth. But let us also extend a welcome where people learn and question and try to figure things out. And the only way you can do that is by building relationships with people, but being hospitable. But a lot of times we think, well, Guy, let's say we have a gay couple coming to the Calgary Church of Christ, and you're like, well, coming here, and after a period of time, I can see how it goes. I don't want to judge any congregation that's represented in this room, but you know, I can see typically how this might go. Let's say you're at church on Sunday, and you see a gay couple sitting in one of the rows, and they're holding hands, and it's pretty obvious. And you're like, look at that, there's a gay couple here. They're holding hands. Oh my gosh, wow, that's great. They came though. Wow, fantastic. They felt free to come here today. That's great. We should go meet them. Hey, George and John, me and my wife, so nice to meet you guys. Wow, thanks for coming. This is fantastic. Okay, yeah. All right, thanks a lot. We'll see you. And like, honey, that gay couple came back again. Isn't that great? Yeah, they're still holding hands. I guess they're still getting. Let's go over. Hi, George and John. Nice to meet you guys. How are you? Thanks for coming to the church today. That's great. Oh, that's nice that they came. Week number 3. Oh, that gay couple is still here. Yeah, they're still a couple. Huh. If anybody's studying the Bible with them. Anyway, George and John, nice to meet you guys. Yeah, thanks for coming. You guys haven't started saying bye yet. Anyway, nice to meet you guys. Week number 4. Honey, that gay couple is still coming to this church. What are we paying Lazine for pity's sakes? Like, isn't anybody getting in there? Isn't anybody studying the Bible with these people? And isn't somebody dealing with this? This is not a good example in front of our kids. We don't want our kids to see this. What's happening in this church? You see, and we can begin to think, well, if we just let these people be here without us getting in and tackling these issues right away and getting them to change everything in their lives in a short amount of time, that somehow that means we are automatically approving of them. But see, there is a difference between acceptance and approval.
Great point.
And so the beauty about Jesus was that he had an ability to be able to accept people even though he didn't approve of them.
Yeah.
And if we were all to go around the room right now and all stand up and really transparently in an open way talk about, the worst sin we've committed in the last 24 hours, and we're all guilty, listen, we're all guilty. We've all said, done, and thought things in the last 24 hours and will in the next 24 hours that God would never approve of, and he accepts all of us.
Yeah.
So there is a difference between acceptance and approval. And when we live like this, what we're saying is, we're not going to rush to judgment.
Yeah.
We're not going to make assumptions. You're a welcome guest here, even though we disagree. I'm not suggesting we don't admit there's a disagreement. But we're so glad you're here. We want to give you time and space to be able to figure these things out. So let us be radical. Let us be radical with the truth. I'm not suggesting that the elder or the minister of the church shouldn't stand up and say that homosexuality is not representative of what God intended for human sexuality. Of course he should. So let us be radical with the truth. But let us also be honest when we don't have an answer to some of these really complex and difficult issues that we're discussing. And let us be also honest when the answer is not popular. No problem. But let us also radically serve and love and walk with anyone who comes to worship with us. You see, you can't have a church where it's like, well, only the people who agree with us get to sit in this part of the room, and then the people that we don't agree with their lives, well, they meet in the classroom and we'll simulcast down to them. No, you can't do that. My question to the church is, can we be secure enough in our own faith to have room for people who are different than us worship with us?
Good question.
A lot of times Christians don't do very well in relationship with people with whom they disagree. They do great with people who agree with them. But if you don't agree with me, we are not going to be very good friends. But how can we possibly convert people from this kind of background unless we're willing to be friends and be hospitable with people with whom we disagree? And hospitality means, I want you to come into my house. I want to serve you a meal. I want to hang out and go to a movie with you. We're going to go to a Flames game together. Oh, I don't know why on earth you would do that. And we're going to, so hospitality means spending time, right? You really got to give yourself to this. Now, the Apostle Paul here gives us a good example. He addressed an issue, and it really gives us a good example because it shows us how he felt and how he responded in the midst of an issue that he strongly disagreed with. We get this in Acts chapter 17, verses 16 to 34. The story is the Apostle Paul was going to the city of Athens. He wasn't expecting to be there very long. He was just waiting for a couple of his companions to catch up. They were late, and he had a few days extra to kill. In Athens that I did yesterday when I came to Calvary. He went sightseeing. So the Apostle Paul went and got on his double-decker buses, and he sat up on the top with his iPhone out, and he was snapping pictures as he was going around the city. The scriptures tell us that he started noticing all of these idols, all these different gods. So how did the Apostle Paul respond when he saw that? Here's what it said. Verse 16, when Paul was, he was greatly distressed to see that the city was full of idols. It's important for us to know and to recognize how the Apostle Paul felt. He was greatly distressed. The New King James Version says that his spirit was provoked within him. I know how you feel when you watch the news and you see a gay pride parade and a bunch of guys are on a float in their underwear and you're like, what He got mad and angry and ticked off, and he yelled and screamed at Paul and said, "If you don't repent and turn to Jesus, you're all going to hell." No. In fact, he didn't take it. Arguments. He didn't argue. No. You know what he did? He reasoned with them in the synagogue, both Jews and God-fearing Greeks, as well as the marketplace, day by day, with those who happened to be there. And here's where I think we've often gone wrong. It's not that the people of Athens weren't lost and going to hell if they didn't repent. Paul had tried that strategy. Reason with these people. He talked to them. And someone said, "What's this bad saying?" They thought he lost his mind. And they laughed at him. Others, though, as you continue through the story, said, "Interesting. Only one? Wow. Never heard that before. I want to hear more on that." And what's so cool is that the Apostle Paul actually found an opportunity, get this, to find common ground. I mean, get this, the Apostle Paul actually praised them, verbally praised them, and applauded them for having a statue and idol. Look at this, at least you're trying. I mean, at least you brought God to an unknown God. I applaud you for that. And the Apostle Paul went down common ground, allowed him to recognize that he too needed. He needed the same God that they needed, that the ground truly is level at the foot of the cross. He was just like the Athenians in their need to have God. So he found common ground with these people, and he started talking to them, reasoning with them, speaking with them, and letting them know about Jesus. See, a lot of times we're dealing with people from the gay community, it can be easy to have nothing in common with these people. But you're wrong. You're all broken, and the ground truly is level at the foot of the cross. And you know what? You were just as lost as they were before you became a Christian. You're saved. So who cares if they're leaving? You just have to find common ground and talk to people and reason with people. It's not these people. I recognize it's a tough gig. There are a lot of churches in the world today that, you know, prosperity, and will say that it doesn't really matter how you live as long as you love Jesus. Christianity that just means just, I don't know, walk around in the lilies all the time. There's just an easy Christianity. It's just, I'm sorry, it's just not the Bible I read. If we want to follow him, we have to pick up our crosses and follow him daily. True Christianity to me says that we have to live our lives with boundaries and restraint. And let's be honest, in today's culture, in today's world, talking about living your life with boundaries and restraint and self-control, yet it's a part of the message that we want to somehow kind of tone down because we know it's not popular. Nevertheless, if you want to follow Jesus, you have to repent. You have to change. And a lot of times, especially when it comes to issues like this, we try to find a way to almost say something without saying something. I'm not suggesting we don't teach biblical truth. I'm saying we have to, but I'm saying we've got to give people time and space and recognize how difficult and challenging it can be for people both living in day life to come into church. Are we willing to be with people who are different than us? In our own faith, to worship with them, giving them time and space. It took me 2 years. 2 years of going to church. 2 years before I finally was willing to say, here's who I really am, and I'm willing to repent now. 2 years. Can you be secure enough in your own faith to have somebody who's living a radically different life than what you think would be in line with what the Bible teaches and to do. And so we were talking about it, and I said, you know, it's very complex. We need to be patient. We need to give people time and space to figure some things out. We need to give them time to hear the gospel. We need to be hospitable. We need to have them in our homes. And they were like, well, there's a retreat coming up in about 3 weeks, and this person wants to go to it. And so we're thinking, if that woman hasn't gone back to being a man in 3 weeks, then she's out of here. That was the word. She's out of here. I'm like, really? Boy, the compassion of your church, the love and mercy of your church is just overwhelming. I can't wait to go to your congregation. That must be a real ball there. Like, honestly, guys, seriously, I didn't leave homosexuality because I believed it was so bad. I left homosexuality because somebody was able to prove to me with an open Bible how much better Jesus is. You've got to build a relationship. To do that, you've got to be able to have time to get to a place where you can have these kinds of tough conversations. And one of the reasons why a lot of times, I wonder how convinced we are that Jesus is the best option in our lives. A lot of times we can forget what it is we've been saved from. You know, I didn't leave homosexuality because I believed it was so bad. I left homosexuality because somebody was able to prove to me how much better Jesus is. We can't tell people about how amazing Jesus is by telling them everything that we're against. What we fail as Christians is that we just become a bunch of protesters. Well, I'm against this, and I'm against abortion, I'm against divorce, I'm against this, I'm against drinking, I'm against card playing, I'm against, I don't know, go through the list. I'm against homosexuality, I'm against transgenders, I'm against you sleeping with your girlfriend, I'm against you sleeping with your boyfriend, we're against swearing, we're against, like, good Lord, like, all we do is talk about all the things that we're against, and yet you can't tell people about how amazing Jesus is, about everything that you're against. If you want to tell people how amazing Jesus is, then tell people about how amazing Jesus is. Right? A lot of times when people are like, oh, you guys are just against everything. No, we're for Jesus. Our faith, what you do is tell these people not why we're against all the ways they're living their lives, but talk about how amazing Jesus is. So let's say you meet a gay couple. Come to church. They're a welcome guest here. This will be a safe place for them. We want them to be able to come and learn. And yes, there may be some disagreements here, but this is going to be a safe place. Like, let's say they come for a period of months or years, and after a while, they're like, that Calgary church, my goodness, those guys were nut jobs, man. I mean, I didn't agree with what they were telling me about sexual ethics, but I'll tell you that I never met a more loving group of people than them. That's what we want. We want them to feel the love of Jesus. And some of these people, not all of them, some people will call you a babbler, but some people will be like Guy Hammond, who will say, I want to hear more. But it took Guy Hammond 2 years of wanting to hear more before he was finally ready and able. There's a lot of times we can think there's no chance, there's no opportunity. Why would I even bother opening my mouth? Let me tell you about a guy by the name of Brandon Redler, my transgender ministry. I got a panicked phone call from these elders in this church in Orlando. A woman had been coming to their church, and she started studying the Bible with some of the sisters of the church, and then it came out through the Bible studies that it's actually a guy. So it's like, what do we do? You know, what do we do about the bathroom situation? And, you know, how can we study the Bible with her? And does she have to, the question was, does she have to become a man again before she can get baptized? And, oh, like, I don't know, let me speak to her, you know? Her name was Desiree. And wonderful woman, and we spoke, and do I have to become a man again to become a Christian? I said, Desiree, you know, the truth is, I'm not sure. I'll tell you what I think, but I might be wrong. I think for you to continue to live your life as a woman will be saying to God, God, you made a mistake. And I don't think God made a mistake. I think you made a mistake. I think you scrambled your life up. I'm unscrambling now. And I don't think you have to become a man again to get baptized, because following Jesus is about the heart. That said, I do think that for you to continue to propagate this idea that you're a woman, even though you're really a man, I think is a mistake. And I think you need to be on the trajectory of going back to living as a man again. Now, I forgot to tell you, at the age of 18, he had complete reassignment surgery. His genitals were removed, his Adam's apple, full hormone therapy. So he's living as a woman, and some of this stuff is unreversible. So a couple of weeks went by, and Desiree called me up on a Friday. She said, hey, I just want you to know, I'm going to do it. I'm going to become a man again. I said, wow, Desiree, that's such a huge decision. What a courageous thing to do. I'm going to get baptized this Sunday. I was like, Desiree, congratulations, but I want to get baptized. I want to become a man again before I get baptized. I said, whoa, slow down. No one's expecting that. No one's asking that. I think you're rushing things there. This could be a process that could take months or years even for you to go back to being a man. So I just think you're going way too fast. She said, no. She said, you were right. To propagate this idea that I'm a female and really I'm a male is telling God that he made a mistake. And besides, following Jesus means we need to sacrifice, and I need to sacrifice to follow Jesus and carry my cross, and this is going to be it. So I'm going to live as a man. So on Friday night, she was an accountant at Disney in Orlando. And so on Friday night, she had a bunch of the guys over, and she turned her female apartment into a guy's apartment. And then on Saturday, went and got her haircut. She had her hair, halfway down her back, and then she got her hair cut off, got a guy's haircut, and then went to Walmart and got all these guys' clothes because she wanted to do it cheap. And then went back to work on Monday. Left work on Friday as Desiree. Showed up for work on Monday as Brandon. Tell me that wouldn't freak the boss out. He was baptized the next Sunday in front of the entire Orlando church with his parents, who weren't Christians, but by now I'm sure thoroughly confused, in the audience. And he was baptized and became a Christian as a young man. Brandon has lived a faithful Christian life ever since. It's been 8 years now. I met him a few years ago at a workshop, and first time face-to-face, and over a period of conversations, he now works for my ministry helping all things transgender. And now that actually I can't travel because of Kathy's illness, he's traveling for me. So I was supposed to go to Brazil for 3 weeks. He's leaving in a couple of weeks on my behalf, teaching all these churches across Brazil. And so, hero in Christ. I hope someday you can meet a young man called Brandon Redler. That guy is the real deal. And if you were to ask him, he'd say, I feel like a woman on the inside every day. I still want to be a woman. I feel like that's natural to me. But it is my honor and privilege to honor and glorify God with my life, living as a man. And so I do that gladly. And you see, guys, I know that's not a popular message. I know the Calgary Herald would flip out. People would laugh and scoff and call him crazy. I know that the measure of boundaries, restraint, and self-control he must live with, the world would laugh at. But I'm telling you, it honors God. And a lot of times we can look at people like Desiree or other gay people in our communities and think, no, I can't share my faith with them. They'll never become Christians anyway. I'm not even going to bother. I want you to know there are more Guy Hammonds and more Brandon Redlers walking around out there, but we have to have the courage to believe that God is bigger than all of these things, and that he really can move people's hearts and lives. And people, whether they're gay or transgender or whatever, their hearts can be moved by the cross of Jesus. And we've got to believe that. All I'm requesting is that while we do it, we're patient. We give people time and space. We recognize that these are complex realities and they won't be fixed quickly. And so we're willing to let people come and worship with us who are different than us and give them the time and space that they need. I'll close with this analogy. You have, Aaron, yeah, when you've been on your phone several times and you've been looking down there and I'm just feeling insecure. So anyway, okay. So when you wash your clothes, what laundry detergent do you use? You do. Okay, you do wash your clothes, right? Okay, so let's say he uses Tide. So let's say I wanted to convert him to Sunlight. Okay, well, there's a couple of different ways I could do it. Let's say, I'm like, Tide, that's a crazy product. I don't know why you're using that. Sunlight is way better. If you think Tide works well, Sunlight can take the same Tide. So let's say there's two different options I have. I could do it like this. How many years do you use? Tide. How long have you been doing that?
Like 2 years.
2 years? You've been using Tide for 2 years and you think it works?
Yeah.
You think it gets the stains out? It smell nice.
Yeah.
You are crazy. I can't believe it. That is wicked, sinful, evil. You're lost and going to hell. I can't believe you're using tide. What you need to do is start using sunlight. You want to try sunlight? No. He doesn't. Well, I'm not going to try sunlight. Why? How dare you judge me like that? Put me down like that. Remember, you can't Jesus by telling them everything you're against. And you can't bring people to Jesus just by putting down how they're living. The Apostle Paul didn't do that in Acts chapter 17, and we can't do that when we're trying to convert people to Jesus. But what if we follow the example of the Apostle Paul and we try a few different strategies, like we're not going to judge, we're going to find common ground, we're going to recognize that we both need clean clothes, and instead of putting down tide and telling them how wicked he is for using tide, I'm talking about how bad tide is. I'm going to spend my time talking about how great sunlight is. So my other option is to do this. Aaron, what kind of laundry detergent do you use? Tide. You know what? Yeah, I get it. I'm sure really well. And I don't judge you for that. I'm not down into that. I'm not going to put Tide down. But, you know, I'm wondering if I could show you another product, price point, would get your clothes way cleaner. Like if you think Tide makes your clothes really bright and airy fresh, let me tell you, there's another product. It's called Sunlight. And if you try Sunlight, I mean, it's just amazing. You feel like running through a meadow, just like, I just can't believe how beautiful this is. I mean, yeah, it's fantastic. And wait till you see how bright it makes your clothes, and it makes your clothes last longer. So I know you've been trying Tide for a long time now. One time to try Sunlight, just give it a try, see if it works. Would you be willing to do that? Would you be willing to have one Bible study with me? Would you be willing to come to one church service? Would you be willing to? I don't want to put down homosexuality. I'm not going to put down Tide. That's not my goal here. I recognize for you it's been working. You see, I didn't leave homosexuality because I thought it was so bad. The truth is, homosexuality was working for me. I ended up leaving homosexuality because somebody was able to prove to me with an open Bible how much better Jesus is. And homosexuality has been working for this person. Why put it down? It would be wrong to think. A lot of times as Christians we can think, oh, they're gay. Well, they must be miserable. No, actually, they're pretty happy. Oh, they're gay. They must be terrible parents. No, I bet you they're better parents than a lot of heterosexually attracted people. Oh, they must have a terrible marriage. They're married and they're gay. Wow, that must be a terrible. No, actually, relationship. You can't spend your time trying to tell them how miserable they are. You have to tell them how amazing Jesus is. Amen. If you can tell them how amazing Jesus is, then maybe. Yes, they might call you a babbler. They might call you crazy when you say, well, you want to come to my church. But some of them are going to go, yeah, I've never heard that before. I'll come once. Okay? If you think that Jesus, see, guys, I believe Jesus is so amazing that the whole world would want to become a Christian if they knew how amazing Jesus is. The problem isn't that Jesus isn't amazing and that homosexuality is so much better than Jesus. The problem is we're not really good salesmen. We have forgotten how amazing Jesus is. We have to lift up Christ and to explain what Jesus has done for us in the hopes that some of these people will go, okay, I'm willing to give you an hour. I'll have an open Bible study with you. You know, the very first event I ever spoke at was at a church, it was at a university in New Brunswick, very first event I ever spoke at was in New Brunswick, New Jersey, Rutgers University. I had a hiccup there. And anyway, nobody had ever asked me to speak before on the issue of homosexuality. I was leading this church in Halifax and living my own little life and just started this little website. Nobody had ever asked me to actually speak on the issue. So I got this call from this little campus ministry in New Jersey. Rutgers University and speak. We want to have a 2-hour event and open it up and invite all the campus. I was like, that would be great. So I said yes immediately. But a week before the event, the minister of this church calls me and he says, hey, brother, hope you're having good quiet times. I was like, I don't know. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Why are you asking? He said, well, word's gotten around campus here at Rutgers that Canadian evangelist is coming to speak about homosexuality and Christianity. And so they've gone to the president. They tried to get it canceled. It's not being canceled. So they've gone down. They've torn down all our signs. And they're protesting, and they're threatening to come, and it caused a big ruckus. We're thinking we need to have security, or even have the police there to protect you. Anyway, I'm sure it'll be fine. We'll see you next week. So I'm like, oh my gosh, what have I got myself into? So I get on the plane. The whole way I felt like I was going to throw up. I was like, what? Why did I say yes to this thing? The night I got there, it was a 200-seat auditorium. there was about 25 Christians huddled over in the corner, terrified, and the room was full of protesters. They had rainbows and banners and buttons and signs, and there were so many protesters, they were lined up out the hall that couldn't even get in. When I got there, I thought, well, I'm going to go around and introduce myself to these people. Once they recognize what a fine, winsome fellow I am, they'll be so impressed. You know, they're gonna of course warm up to me. So I started going around the room saying, "Nice to meet you." Oh, wouldn't shake my hand. "Hey, I'm the guest speaker today. My name's Guy. Nice to meet you." Oh, won't shake my hand. And all these protesters just folded their arms, turned their heads down, wouldn't look at me. Nobody would even talk to me. I thought, oh man, this is not going to be good. I got up and I gave my 2 talks, 45 minutes each. And to their credit, they were really respectful. Nobody interrupted. They all sat and listened. There was this one woman sitting in the front row. She had this big black leather jacket on. And she was so angry. And if looks could kill, right? I mean, she was just staring me down the entire time. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm in New Jersey. I bet you there's a gun under that jacket. Hoping that the security that they had promised was actually there. I gave my 2 talks. I thought, I don't want to answer any questions. I just want to get out of here. So I'd finished. I said, hey, thank you very much for everyone. Thanks so much for having me. Real honored to be here at Rutgers University. Good night. I started to walk away, and all of a sudden this lady yells from back, wait a minute! We were told you to be here at 9 o'clock. It's only 22 and I have a question. Oh my gosh. And I said, yes, what's your question? She asked it. I answered it. And all of a sudden, all these hands went up. Like, I was like, oh my gosh. And people started yelling. Some people were screaming. I started losing control of the situation. I thought, oh, I am in serious trouble. Where I was pointing, I just saw these hands and said, you, what do you want to say? And the woman stood up. She said, actually, I'm the president of the gay, lesbian, transgender organization at Rutgers University. She said, I'm the one who organized the event. And she said, you know, the truth is, if what you talked about tonight, Christianity, she said, this is what the whole world needs. Wow. She said, I've never heard anything like this before. She says, I'm not saying I want to join your church, become a Christian, but I just want to say I've never heard this side of Christianity. Straightforward, we disagreed, but you've treated us with kindness and respect, and you've given me answers I've never heard before. So I'm going to ask everybody in my group, put your hands down. We're not going to protest against this guy. We're going to leave him alone. And all the hands went down. I was so relieved. And when it finished, front row, big leather jacket, she came up and with tears streaming down her face, she came and gave me this big hug. And while she was hugging me, I could feel the gun underneath the jacket. You see, there is a way for us to talk about this in a respectful, kind, and loving way, but I think hospitality is the key. Being willing to be with people who are different than us is the key. And I think this attitude is helpful too. The Bible talks about pride, arrogance, judgmentalism over 900 times. It only talks about homosexuality 5 times. Now I get it. You cannot judge the importance of a scripture based on how many times it's talked about. The truth is that the Bible talked about pride and arrogance only once. It should be enough to cause us to be people who are humble. And if the Bible only talked about homosexuality or sexual ethics only once, it should be enough for us to be people who are pure. That said, the fact that the score is 5 should cause us to be people who are willing to speak with a little hesitancy on issues that are this complex and this difficult to understand. You know, one of the biggest questions I get is, what do you do with a gay couple who comes to church who want to become Christians and they're married? I actually ran into this situation in a church in Boston a few years ago. 2 women, married, have kids, adopted. They want to become Christians. One of the evangelists in the church said, Guy, isn't it possible that they just live together and commit to sexual purity and they live in the same household for the sake of the kids? I said, yeah, I get it. Maybe I'm wrong. But that means that we're saying that the real problem here is sexual intimacy, and it isn't. A lot of times we can think that love is the final standard between what is right and what is wrong. But just because you genuinely love somebody doesn't mean that it's right. You could be really in love with another woman at work, and the love be real genuine. We're not arguing whether love is genuine or not. It's wrong. You're in love with another woman. Something tells me your wife at home wouldn't appreciate it too much. But honey, the love is so real. Well, it might be, but stop it. A lot of times, certainly in our world, in our society, love is the final standard, determining what is right and wrong. Well, love is genuine. This couple really love each other. Well, they might, but you know, Matthew chapter 10, if we put anything above God, love anything more than God, it's sin. So I'm sorry they really love each other. We're not arguing that fact. So I said the real issue is not sexual intimacy. The real issue is that these two people have been enmeshed in a romantic relationship. And for them to be under the same roof in the same house, romantically involved, even though they agreed to not be sexually intimate, they're still romantic with each other. They're still in love with each other. And that is not representative of what we see the scriptures teach. You cannot find one single example anywhere in the Bible that lifts up homosexuality in a positive manner. Not one. The Bible doesn't talk about homosexuality in a positive light ever. And so, no, for these two people to live together, they want to become Christians. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm telling you right now my conviction is I cannot see how two gay people can live together, involved, and become Christians. One of them is going to have to move out. I said, I'm sorry, I know that's not going to be popular. I know that's going to be challenging. But you know what? I'm telling you guys, Satan has made it so difficult for people to follow Jesus. When I was becoming a Christian, all I had to do was stop sleeping around and become a Christian. Now, by changing our laws, he has made it so that people have so scrambled their lives that it's almost impossible to unscramble. So high, where we've got kids involved, we're married, the state says we're married, that it's almost impossible now for people to say, I'm going to give all that up and carry that cross in order to follow Jesus. I tell people, listen, you're the one who scrambled the egg, not God. Don't blame him. God scrambled the egg. You're going to have to do some unscrambling. I know it's not going to be easy, and I think we as a church are going to have to be patient and kind and take our time and do everything we can to help these people be successful. I said, even with these two kids, I was talking to these two women. I said, I know what a difficult and challenging thing it would be for one of the moms to have to move out, but why do we present it to the kids like this? Instead of, God's making us split up, or the church is making us split up, or the Bible says we can't live together. So, what about, listen, mommy and mummy made a mistake. We want to honor God with our lives. And to do that, a part of that means that a mistake. This mommy here is going to have to live in another apartment with you and the kids a lot. We'll do everything we can to help. Of course, we love you kids, but they, as a family, to honor God and make up for a mistake that we made. I'm just saying that these are, as I said, complex realities. Do I have all the answers on this stuff? No, I don't. But never forget Brandon Redler. Never forget Guy Hammond. Never forget other people whose lives were very complex and difficult. And if you have looked at us and said, it's not possible. How is it that a man encounters hundreds of times with different men can become a Christian and go full turkey and never participate in homosexuality again for 30 years? How is that possible? There are other Guy Hammonds out there. There are other Brandon Redlers out there. It is possible. But if we follow the strategies that we talked about today, I really believe we can have an impact. And while some will call you a babbler, there are a few who someday, I think, will become a Christian. Thank you for your time here. Can I just say one more thing and then I'll really stop? A lot of times people want to know how to talk to my family members about homosexuality. Let's say you have an uncle or an aunt, a brother, a sister, whoever, and they're gay. And you're like, I've always wanted to talk to Uncle Bob. I don't know what to say. I know he's living a gay life, and I want to talk to him about Jesus. I don't know what to say to Uncle Bob. And so year after year, you don't say anything because you're tongue-tied. You don't want to fight. You don't want to argue with Uncle Bob. And you don't want there to be weird between you and Uncle Bob, so just don't say anything. This could be a family member or a very close friend. Here's what I would suggest you do. At the next family reunion, I would call Uncle Bob aside in a private place, and I'd say, hey, Uncle Bob, listen, I just want you to know, you've been such an amazing uncle, such a great friend all these years. I just want you to know how much I love you and respect you, and how grateful I am that you're in my life. Can I, just for like 30 seconds though, just mention something to you? I don't at all want to come across disrespectful, and I don't want it to be weird between us. So if that is what you're feeling like, I apologize in advance. I just want to say this. Uncle Bob, I know you're living this gay life. And as a Christian, you know I don't agree with that. That is what the Bible teaches. I just want to say this. There isn't anything you could say or do that would make me think less of you or love you less. Someday in the future, when you're ready, whether that's a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, it doesn't matter, Uncle Bob. Whenever you're ready, when you're ready to have a spiritual conversation with an open Bible, I want to have that talk. In the meantime, I promise I'll never bring it up again. That ball is in your court. You're a great uncle. I love you very much. Let's go have some potato salad. And you go. And then you never bring it up again. Take the burden off yourself. Now, how am I going to have this talk? What am I going to say? What if they get upset? What if I hurt their feelings? Listen, it's not your responsibility. Yeah. Just let this person that you love know, I want to have the talk someday when you're ready. In the meantime, I'll never bring it up again. And you wait for them to bring it up. I promise you, Uncle Bob will never forget that conversation. And at the next family reunion next year, don't be like, Uncle Bob, remember that talk we had last year? You want to? No. Keep to your word. You never bring it up again. Uncle Bob will never forget. One day, Uncle Bob or your friend, prayerfully, because behind the scenes you're going to pray like crazy. By saying never bring it up again, I'm not suggesting you quit fighting. No, I'm saying no. This is spiritual warfare, and you pray like crazy behind the scenes for God to work and maneuver His way through Uncle Bob's life to bring him to a point where he sees his need for Jesus. So that one day Uncle Bob will come back and say, you know, 8 years ago at that family reunion, remember you said you wanted to have that talk? Okay, let's have it. What did you want to say? Now you've got your chance. But you've done so by being patient, straightforward, and honest, but letting Him decide the time frame on that. But relieve yourself of this burden. Maybe it's even someone at work. I've always wanted to talk to that guy at work. I know, what do I say? Maybe it's my next door neighbor. Man, they're great neighbors. I love these people, but how do I even talk about Jesus? Just 30 seconds. Hey, listen, can I just, 30 seconds is all I ask. One day when you're ready, I want to have that talk with an open Bible. In the meantime, I'll never bring it up again. You're great neighbors. I think you guys are amazing. And then behind the scenes, you're praying like crazy. Maybe you're going to have to pray like crazy for a period of years. Maybe one day they'll never come back. It's not your burden. It's not your responsibility. It's theirs. But prayerfully, the Holy Spirit will have worked and maneuvered in their way, in their hearts, to bring them to a point where they said, okay, next door neighbor, you said that 5 years ago. What do you want to say? Great, let's talk next Thursday. I have a Bible. Oh yeah, I got 6 studies I can go through with you right here. And you can help these people. Does that make sense? Yeah. Relieve yourself of the burden. The burden isn't on you. It's on them. Okay, the ball's in their court. You guys are amazing. Thank you very much for being here. We're going to stop for lunch, and then we'll have our final class. The last class is the shortest one, to your relief, I'm sure. And that we will talk about how to respond to pro-gay theology. All right? What time do we come back? 11:30 to 12. We don't need 2 hours for lunch.
It's only 11:30?
Yeah.
That's why I was checking my phone to see what.
That's why.
The text messages fall.
Aaron, I have been judgmental.
Let's say 1:10.
1:10, 11:30 to 12. 11:30 to 12:30. That's an hour and a half. We have an hour and a half.
11:30 to 1:10.
No, that's too long.
It's too long?
Yeah.
Oh, Aaron, they're protesting, buddy.
What?
You know, seriously. An hour?
Yeah.
What do you think? Are you good?
Yeah.
Come back in an hour?
1 o'clock.
Okay.
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock's good.
Aaron, are we okay with 1? You're the man in charge, man. So I totally respect it. What do you say? You say 4 o'clock, we'll come back at 4.
I will take it.
Aaron said 1. So for those of you returning, 1 o'clock, and am I preaching tomorrow at this church? Yeah. Is that here?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So for those of you who I won't get to see again, I'll be preaching tomorrow here too. And so please bring your friends. Yes. On the other building, same hotel.
Yes, same hotel.
Across the street. Okay. 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 All right. Guys, thank you. Well, for those of you returning for that last class, we'll see you at 1 o'clock. We're done. Thank you.
Yeah. Can you go get them?
It'll be taken.